the pantheon of professional wrestling legends, some names shine brighter than others, but few have been as criminally overlooked as Rick Martel. His career trajectory was a fascinating journey, evolving from a celebrated world champion known for his technical prowess to the unforgettable persona of the Model, a character that made him a household name, famous for his flamboyant designer attire and a spritz of his signature perfume to incapacitate his rivals. But in 1998, a tragically botched hip toss brought his incredible career to an abrupt and premature end. Now, more than a quarter century later, the glaring question remains: why is Rick Martel still absent from the Hall of Fame? His story begins in 1956, when Richard Venal was born in the heart of Quebec City, Canada. While most children his age were preoccupied with schoolwork and playground games, a young Rick was already immersed in the demanding world of professional wrestling, mastering the essential skills of the trade. You see, for Rick, the squared circle wasn't merely an athletic pursuit. It was a birthright, the family enterprise. He spent his formative years idolizing his brother, Michel Martel, as he dominated the wrestling circuits, ensuring that the passion for this business was ingrained in his very DNA from the moment he was born. This early dedication to the disciplines of amateur wrestling proved invaluable, creating a rock-solid foundation of skill that would later distinguish him as one of the most technically gifted and fundamentally sound athletes of his generation. The tale of Rick's entry into the professional ranks is the stuff of legend, almost cinematic in its telling. An unexpected injury took another wrestler out of commission, and his brother Michel knew instantly who possessed the talent to fill the void. In a remarkable turn of events, at the tender age of just 16, Rick Martel made his professional debut, stepping into the ring as an emergency replacement. In a twist of fate that wrestling historians love to recount, Michel Martel, who was already a rising star in Stampede Wrestling with the tag team The Mercenaries, was completely unaware that this simple act of calling his younger brother would set in motion one of the most resilient and celebrated careers in the history of the sport. However, it wasn't merely his innate talent that distinguished Rick in his early days. It was his insatiable hunger for knowledge and his unwavering commitment to honing his skills which led him to journey across the globe. Following a path that future luminaries like William Regal and Chris Jericho would later emulate, the young Rick Martel grasped a fundamental truth of the business. True greatness required a global education in the diverse styles and philosophies of wrestling from every corner of the world. Long before the bright lights of the WWF ever beckoned, Rick had already assembled a list of accolades that would be the envy of most seasoned professionals. He claimed prestigious titles in Stu Hart's iconic Stampede Wrestling and secured championships in Vancouver's NWA All-Star Wrestling, consistently demonstrating his championship pedigree no matter the territory. Indeed, where many performers found it difficult to adjust to varying wrestling cultures, Rick flourished, embracing each new challenge and adding championship gold from Japan, Puerto Rico, and even as far as New Zealand to his ever-expanding trophy case. As the mid-1970s rolled around, Rick Martel recognized that ascending to the upper echelon of the sport meant conquering the lucrative American market. However, for an aspiring French-Canadian athlete, the journey southward involved far more than a simple trip across the border. Two formidable obstacles barred his path to achieving his American dream: the bureaucratic nightmare of securing a work visa and the crucial task of becoming fluent in English. Mastering the language was absolutely essential for building a rapport with audiences in the United States. In later years, Martel would frequently recount how his tenure in Calgary's Stampede Wrestling promotion unexpectedly paved the way for his big break. It was during his time working for the legendary Stu Hart that he had a pivotal encounter with Kevin Sullivan, forging a connection that would become far more instrumental to his career than either man could have possibly imagined. In the wrestling ecosystem of that era, who you knew was everything. And the word on the street was that Kevin Sullivan was the key to unlocking the door to the highly competitive Florida territory for gifted performers. Yet, even with Sullivan's influential endorsement, the visa application process in 1975 became an arduous test of Rick's resolve. And what was perhaps an even greater mountain to climb was the significant language barrier that confronted him upon his arrival. In those early interviews with the iconic announcer Gordon Soley, the young Canadian hopeful struggled immensely, only able to offer the most rudimentary answers. A stark contrast to the articulate and charismatic superstar he was destined to become. Just as Rick's star was beginning its meteoric rise, a devastating tragedy occurred. One that would irrevocably alter the course of his life and career. The news was unthinkable. Michel Martel, Rick's cherished older brother, and the very person who had opened the door for him into the wrestling world, had suddenly collapsed following a match in Puerto Rico. The confirmation of his brother's death sent shockwaves through Rick, rattling him to the depths of his soul. It was a loss that went far beyond family. He had been stripped of his mentor, his guiding light, and the most profound link he had to the industry he loved. The path to wrestling stardom is littered with obstacles and personal sacrifices for everyone. But very few performers have ever had to endure such a deeply personal and shattering loss, just as their career was beginning to accelerate. Michel Martel's passing was not only a blow to the wrestling community, which lost a gifted athlete, but it also left a young Rick to find his own way through the notoriously treacherous landscape of professional wrestling, now without his most valued confidant and guide. In 1980, while still grappling with the heavy burden of his brother's tragic death, Rick Martel finally realized a long-held ambition. He had made it to the World Wrestling Federation. His combination of classic good looks and superb in-ring technical skills immediately captured the attention of the WWF's decision-makers. Though he began his tenure as a singles competitor, his career truly ignited when he formed a dynamic tag team with Tony Garea. This new partnership was an immediate sensation, as the pair stormed through the division and dethroned the formidable Wild Samoans to seize the WWF Tag Team Championships before the close of the year. Over the following year, Martel and Garea engaged in an epic rivalry with the Wild Samoans, swapping the coveted championship belts in a thrilling series of contests that consistently left audiences absolutely breathless. Their championship reign, however, came to an end at the hands of the cunning and devious duo of Mr. Fuji and Mr. Saito, who managed to outwit them and capture the tag team titles. Although they fought with tremendous heart and determination in the subsequent rematches, Martel and Garea were ultimately unable to reclaim the championship glory they had once held. By 1982, feeling the need for a new challenge and a fresh start, Martel set his sights on the American Wrestling Association, viewing it as the ideal territory to redefine his career. The AWA, masterfully guided by the legendary Vern Gagne, was renowned for its emphasis on pure, technical wrestling, a style that was perfectly suited to Martel's exceptional in-ring abilities. Where some performers might have found the AWA's more mat-based, traditional approach difficult to adjust to, Rick flourished, finding himself completely at home in this new competitive landscape. During his initial years in the AWA, Martel methodically ascended the ladder of contention, delivering masterful wrestling performances on a nightly basis that earned the respect and admiration of fans and his peers alike. That relentless dedication culminated in a monumental achievement in May of 1984, when Rick accomplished what many believed to be an insurmountable task. He defeated the seemingly invincible Nick Bockwinkel to become the new AWA World Heavyweight Champion. This victory was more than just another championship win. It was a definitive statement that Rick Martel belonged in the elite tier of professional wrestling. Yet, capturing the title was merely the beginning of his journey. For the subsequent 19 months, Martel solidified his status as a true fighting champion, defending his title against a diverse array of challengers in a series of bouts that would forever cement his reputation as one of the most brilliant, technical wrestlers of his generation. He faced every type of opponent imaginable, from seasoned veterans like Bob Backlund and rising phenoms like Michael Hayes, to technical wizards like Larry Zbyszko and charismatic showmen like Jimmy Garvin, turning back every challenger and proving his reign was absolutely legitimate. And though his brother Michel was not physically present to witness these triumphs, Rick was undoubtedly honoring his memory, embodying every principle of excellence that the Martel name represented within the world of professional wrestling. In October of 1985, the wrestling world turned its eyes to Tokyo, Japan for a truly special encounter. A dream match pitting two of the sport's most revered champions against one another. The moment AWA World Champion Rick Martel came face-to-face in the ring with NWA World Champion Ric Flair, the atmosphere inside the arena became absolutely electric with anticipation. For 35 intense and grueling minutes, these two grandmasters of the squared circle delivered an absolute masterpiece of technical wrestling. A clinic that ultimately concluded in a double countout, leaving the audience desperate for a definitive conclusion. This legendary contest, which took place on an All-Japan Pro Wrestling event, has since been immortalized as one of the purest and most exceptional displays of professional wrestling from that entire decade. As is the case with all great champions, his reign had to conclude eventually. In December of 1985, the formidable Stan Hansen succeeded in dethroning Martel. Instead of pursuing an immediate chance to reclaim his title, Rick opted for a different path, embarking on a new chapter in his career. Whereas many performers would have been satisfied to remain within the familiar confines of the American wrestling scene, Martel ventured back to his roots, taking his world-class skills to international wrestling, known as Lutte Internationale in his home province of Quebec, and once more demonstrating his unparalleled ability to achieve success on a global stage. On October 20th, 1986, Rick Martel made his grand return to the WWF. But he arrived with a fresh perspective and a dynamic new tag team partner. Joining forces with the highly promising Tom Zenk, they forged a powerful alliance known as the Can-Am Connection. From the moment they stepped into the ring together that autumn, the synergy between the seasoned veteran Martel and the energetic newcomer Zenk was simply undeniable, shining through in their very first televised matches. In fact, before they could even properly establish themselves stateside, the duo was dispatched to Japan to represent the promotion in All Japan Pro Wrestling's incredibly prestigious Real-World Tag League. January of 1987 marked the official re-entry of the Can-Am Connection into the WWF landscape, initiating what would become an almost 8-year-long tenure for Martel within the company. Though Martel was completely unaware of it at that moment, he was standing on the precipice of the most unforgettable and defining era of his entire career, a period that would witness his metamorphosis from a cherished hero to one of the most reviled villains in the sport. That shocking transformation, however, was still a long way off. For the time being, the master of technical wrestling, known as Rick Martel, was only just embarking on his most consequential and significant run with the promotion. The Can-Am Connection swiftly demonstrated that they were far more than just another handsome tag team. While their matinee idol looks certainly captivated a portion of the audience, it was their high-octane, technically flawless performance inside the ropes that compelled everyone to pay close attention. The WWF's top brass recognized they had something truly special, which led them to select Martel and Zenk for the crucial opening contest of WrestleMania 3, an event widely considered the most monumental show in wrestling history up to that point. On that historic night, they delivered spectacularly, achieving victory over the crafty veteran team of Magnificent Don Morocco and Cowboy Bob Orton in a match that brilliantly set the energetic pace for the entire legendary evening. In the wake of their WrestleMania triumph, the Can-Am Connection became absolute mainstays on the WWF's grueling, non-televised house show circuit. Behind the curtain, the team was being meticulously groomed for a much grander destiny. While the vast majority of fans viewing from home would never know it, Martel and Zenk received two separate opportunities to challenge the Hart Foundation for the WWF Tag Team Championships during dark matches. These unaired bouts were often used as trial runs for future televised programs. When reviewing the booking strategies and match history from that specific time, it becomes abundantly clear that the WWF was laying the groundwork for massive plans involving the Can-Am connection. Reports that surfaced later on indicated that Vince McMahon personally viewed them as his next premier fan-favorite tag team, destined to walk the same beloved path as iconic duos like the Rockers and the British Bulldogs. With their potent mixture of good looks, extraordinary athletic talent, and a genuine connection with the crowd, Martel and Zenk appeared to be on an unstoppable course towards tag team supremacy. But the world of professional wrestling can be as merciless as it is unpredictable. Just as the Can-Am connection was hitting its stride and building incredible momentum, the entire partnership completely disintegrated over that age-old wrestling problem: money. That's right. Tom Zenk, feeling that his compensation was unjust, grew utterly convinced that his partner was earning a significantly larger paycheck, a serious accusation that Rick Martel has vehemently denied to this very day. The contentious dispute became impossible to mediate, prompting Zenk to make the fateful choice to depart from the WWF. After their split, Zenk would have to forge a new path in the industry, which included a return to Japan before a run in the AWA. He would eventually re-emerge in World Championship Wrestling using the new name Z-Man, although he never quite managed to attain the stratospheric heights that had seemed so attainable during those promising early days of the Can-Am connection. What had all the makings of one of wrestling's most celebrated tag team success stories devolved instead into yet another cautionary narrative about just how rapidly fortunes can change in the volatile world of professional wrestling. In the immediate aftermath of the Can-Am connection's abrupt dissolution, the WWF ensured that Rick Martel would not remain without a partner for very long. When the powerful Islanders began to consistently target Martel during his singles matches, it was the heroic Tito Santana who bravely intervened to balance the scales. The formation of Strikeforce was about more than just replacing a team. It was about elevating the concept to build something even greater. The parallels between Strikeforce and the Can-Am connection were impossible to overlook. From retaining the exact same entrance music to preserving that fan-favorite style of high-energy, technical wrestling, Strikeforce felt like a seamless and logical next step from what Martel had begun with Zenk. While many new tag teams often struggle to develop their chemistry, Martel and Santana clicked from the very beginning, their shared wrestling philosophies making them a flawless match. But Strikeforce was destined to achieve something that had always eluded the Can-Am connection: capturing championship gold. During a broadcast of WWF Superstars, Martel and Santana sent shockwaves across the wrestling landscape by defeating the Hart Foundation and becoming the new WWF Tag Team Champions. That monumental victory served as undeniable proof that Strikeforce was not merely a substitute team. They were a legitimate championship-caliber force in their own right. Their reign on top, however, would be far more fleeting than they had hoped. At WrestleMania 4, the overwhelming power of the duo known as Demolition was simply too much for Strikeforce to handle, with the imposing figures of Axe and Smash capturing the tag team titles. Although losing a championship belt was a devastating professional blow, the events that were about to unfold would have an infinitely greater impact on both Martel's career and his personal life. Away from the ring and the roaring crowds, Martel was facing a battle far more significant than any championship defense. His wife had become ill and was in need of his care. The WWF, demonstrating a level of compassion not always seen in the cutthroat wrestling business, granted Rick 6 months off to be with his family. What absolutely no one could have possibly anticipated was just how profoundly different the landscape would be when he finally made his return to the squared circle. On the surface, Rick Martel's reappearance in the WWF in early 1989 seemed to herald a fresh beginning for Strikeforce. After his 6-month hiatus spent caring for his wife, Martel was once again standing by the side of his partner Tito Santana, and the reunited duo was booked for a high-stakes encounter against the Brainbusters at WrestleMania 5. While the fans in attendance fully expected to witness the same flawless, synchronized teamwork that had previously made Strikeforce champions, they instead became witnesses to one of wrestling's most underappreciated and shocking betrayals. In a pivotal moment that would permanently redefine both of their careers, Santana's flying forearm maneuver accidentally made contact with his own partner. But rather than shrugging it off as countless teammates had done over the years, something inside Rick Martel finally snapped. The deep-seated frustration that had been festering during his time away from the spotlight violently boiled over. In an absolutely stunning moment, Martel abandoned the match entirely, turning his back and walking away, leaving his partner utterly defenseless against the vicious 2-on-1 assault from Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. The fallout from this incident proved to be even more dramatic than the act of betrayal itself. In a venomous interview segment that followed, Martel completely eviscerated his former partner, viciously claiming that Santana had been nothing but a passenger riding on his coattails to fame. While wrestling history rightfully celebrates the monumental heel turns of legends like Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13, Triple H at WrestleMania 15, or Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 17, the bitter dissolution of Strikeforce remains one of the most criminally underrated character shifts in WrestleMania's long history. The betrayal was far more than just the end of a successful tag team. It was the symbol of a complete and total transformation for Rick Martel. The clean-cut, honorable, technical wizard who had captured championships all over the globe was gone. Standing in his place was a man who was now prepared to reveal a much darker, more self-absorbed side of his personality. By the end of 1989, Rick Martel wasn't just another bad guy. He was morphing into a persona the likes of which wrestling had never before encountered. While most wrestlers who turned villainous did so by becoming more savage or violent, Martel took an entirely different and more creative path, completely reinventing himself as the Model. This was not just some new nickname. It was a comprehensive character overhaul that would go on to be the most iconic role of his career. The absolute genius of the Model gimmick was in its meticulous details, from his perfectly sculpted hair to his arrogant runway strut to the ring. Martel completely embodied every aspect of his new narcissistic persona. But what was perhaps his ultimate masterstroke was the introduction of arrogance, his personal signature fragrance that also served as a devious weapon against his foes. Indeed, while other wrestlers were resorting to foreign objects or brass knuckles, the Model had ingeniously weaponized vanity itself, temporarily blinding his opponents with a debilitating spray of his exclusive cologne. What made this new character resonate so powerfully was how naturally it seemed to align with Martel's own persona. His distinct French-Canadian accent, once seen as a potential hurdle in American wrestling, was now a major asset, adding another layer of perceived sophistication to his smug character. Every single mannerism, every calculated gesture, and every word that he spoke seemed perfectly designed to incite the maximum level of hatred from the fans. The sheer effectiveness of this dramatic character transformation was put on full display at the 1989 Survivor Series, where Martel experienced the satisfaction of personally eliminating his former partner Tito Santana from their elimination match. That triumphant moment was the definitive conclusion to their conflict, establishing that the Model was far more than a handsome competitor. He was a truly formidable presence in the squared circle. Although Martel was always lauded for his technical prowess, It was the seamless fusion of his in-ring artistry and compelling character portrayal that truly elevated him above his peers. In retrospect, it is abundantly clear that the model persona was not merely another wrestling caricature. It represented Rick Martel discovering his ultimate purpose within the entertainment industry. Even though he had found considerable success as a fan favorite in both solo and tag team roles, it was his portrayal of this narcissistic villain that allowed him to truly unleash his full spectrum of abilities. The star of the model continued its ascent as he entered WrestleMania 6, where he swiftly dispatched Koko B. Ware. However, his subsequent rivalry would deliver some of the most unforgettable scenes of 1990. The moment Rick Martel blinded Jake the Snake Roberts with a spray of his arrogance cologne, he ignited a bitter and personal war that would come to characterize that period for both men. The animosity between Martel and Roberts boiled over, reaching its initial climax at the 1990 Survivor Series. At the helm of his hand-picked team of villains, Power and Glory alongside the Warlord, Martel's Visionaries achieved a feat seldom seen in Survivor Series lore: a complete and total victory over Roberts' Vipers, a squad that featured Jimmy Snuka and the acrobatic Rockers. While total elimination victories were a rarity in these signature matches, the model and his crew executed it with astonishing ease. Martel's night, however, was far from finished. In keeping with the tradition of that era, every wrestler who survived their respective elimination matches would converge for one final climactic confrontation. The Visionaries soon found themselves staring down a veritable supergroup of beloved heroes, a lineup that included the legendary Hulk Hogan, the Ultimate Warrior, and, in a twist of fate, Martel's estranged former partner, Tito Santana. Despite the model having emerged from his earlier contest without a single scratch, the overwhelming force of Hogan and Warrior combined was simply insurmountable, resulting in his elimination to a thunderous ovation from the crowd. Yet, the deeply personal conflict between Roberts and Martel was far from settled. At the 1991 Royal Rumble, Martel not only succeeded in eliminating his arch-rival, but also etched his name in the record books by surviving an incredible 53 minutes in the grueling match. The feud demanded a conclusive final chapter, and at WrestleMania 7, the two were scheduled for one of the sport's most unconventional contest types: a blindfold match. Although the blindfold match might have appeared to be a clever way to resolve their storyline at the time, especially considering Martel had blinded Roberts, viewing it today makes it difficult to endorse. The widely criticized match, which saw Roberts claim the final victory, served as a powerful lesson that some imaginative ideas translate much better in theory than they do in actual execution. Having finally closed the book on his intensely bitter feud with Jake Roberts, Rick Martel was presented with a remarkable new stage. The WWF's collaboration with Super World of Sports in Japan provided an opportunity for the model to take his conceited character to an international audience. Upon his return to WWF programming, Martel arrived perfectly timed for an event that many fans and critics still hail as one of the most legendary Royal Rumble matches ever staged: the 1992 edition. With the WWF Championship itself hanging in the balance, the ring was jam-packed with a veritable who's who of wrestling royalty. From the Macho Man Randy Savage to Hulk Hogan, from the emerging superstar Shawn Michaels to the iconic Rowdy Roddy Piper, and from The Undertaker to the $1 Million Man. This was no ordinary battle royal. It was an unparalleled exhibition of what was arguably the most profoundly talented roster in the entire history of the WWF. The evening ultimately belonged to the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who made his entrance at number 3 and endured for over an hour to seize the WWF Championship. Yet, even within this constellation of superstars, the model successfully made his impact known. Even though he did not emerge victorious, Martel's involvement in this monumental Royal Rumble was instrumental in solidifying his status among the top-tier performers of that generation. The opening months of 1992 saw the model consistently working with the WWF's ascendant new talent. At WrestleMania 8, he was on the losing side of a bout against the undefeated Tatanka, playing a key role in extending the Native American sensation's remarkable winning streak. While some performers of his stature might have chafed at being positioned to help elevate younger talent, Martel's unwavering professionalism ensured he could make any opponent look like a star inside the ropes. Upon returning to the United States, he found himself reigniting his classic rivalry with Tito Santana, although his old ally had since adopted a new identity, now performing as the bullfighting El Matador. Although the intensity of their feud had subsided over time, the undeniable chemistry between the two former partners was as potent and compelling as ever. But it was the summer of 1992 that was destined to deliver one of Rick Martel's most iconic career matches. The model became embroiled in a singular feud with a fellow narcissist, Shawn Michaels, as the two men vied for the managerial affections of the captivating, sensational Sherry. Whereas most wrestling conflicts revolved around championships or deep-seated grudges, this particular rivalry was a pure battle of egos. Two of the sport's most arrogant figures competing to determine who was the undisputed premier heartthrob in the WWF. Their showdown at SummerSlam 1992 was governed by one of the most peculiar stipulations ever conceived in wrestling. Neither competitor was permitted to strike the other in the face. This unusual rule was a perfect fit for their characters, as both the model and the Heartbreak Kid were utterly fixated on safeguarding their valuable visages. While some observers may have viewed this as a creative handicap, these two exceptionally talented wrestlers brilliantly transformed it into a unique showcase that distinguished their match from every other contest on the event. This encounter between Martel and Michaels perfectly encapsulated what made their respective personas so effective. Two men so profoundly vain and obsessed with their own reflections that they literally had a no face-punching clause written into their official match agreement. Although fans may have perceived the stipulation as somewhat comical, it actually signified a very unusual occurrence for that time. A major pay-per-view match featuring two villainous wrestlers against one another. The bout concluded in a double countout, with sensational Sherry ultimately deciding to remain allied with the Heartbreak Kid. Following this prominent program, Martel was once again placed in a storyline with his familiar adversary, Tatanka. This time, however, the model had committed a grievous cultural offense by stealing Tatanka's sacred eagle feathers, dismissively parading them as if they were merely a trendy fashion accessory. This feud reached its conclusion at the 1992 Survivor Series, where Tatanka finally recovered his cherished feathers and restored his honor by defeating the model. What followed was one of wrestling's most enduring puzzles: the slow, inexplicable decline of the model persona. Despite possessing one of the most polished and defined characters in the entire organization and delivering consistently excellent in-ring work, Rick Martel was conspicuously absent from the WrestleMania 9 card. At a time when performers like the model should have been thriving in the WWF's increasingly character-centric landscape of the early 90s, the company, for reasons unknown, appeared to have lost all motivation to feature him prominently. By 1993, Martel's televised appearances grew increasingly infrequent. When he was featured, his role was typically to help build the credibility of newer stars, such as the 1-2-3 Kid or Razor Ramon, on the non-televised event circuit. While the model remained as impeccably skilled as ever within the ropes, the WWF seemed inexplicably content to allow one of its most dependable assets to fade away in the lower portion of the card. For countless fans and wrestling historians, this period remains one of the most perplexing booking mysteries of that entire generation. A proven talent with a fantastic character was seemingly cast aside without any logical explanation. September of 1993 provided a fleeting moment of renewed promise for the model's career, as he found himself in the running for the vacated Intercontinental Championship. Following successful advancements by both him and Razor Ramon in their qualifying bouts, the two competitors clashed on Monday Night Raw with the coveted championship at stake. Although Martel was ultimately unsuccessful against the bad guy, the match itself was a powerful exhibition that reminded everyone of his exceptional capabilities when provided with a significant platform. However, any forward momentum gained from that championship opportunity vanished almost immediately, as Martel resumed his descent down the company hierarchy. He participated in the traditional Survivor Series match that year and made another appearance at the Royal Rumble in January 1994. But the main event spotlight felt more distant than ever. Even though the model remained a master of his craft, it became increasingly clear that the WWF's creative team had different priorities for their broadcast time, and his talent was being sidelined. Arguably, the most significant opportunity that slipped through his fingers occurred at the monumental WrestleMania 10. Martel was originally booked for a major 10-man tag team showdown at the legendary Madison Square Garden, but due to severe time constraints, the entire match was unfortunately cut from the final event card. Although the match was rescheduled and did happen the very next night on Raw, where Martel's team claimed the victory, the experience paled in comparison to the prestige and magic of a genuine WrestleMania moment. Without a doubt, a high-profile win inside the Garden on the grandest stage of them all could have been the catalyst needed to completely rejuvenate the model's career. But fate had other plans. Rick Martel's tenure with the WWF ultimately faded away with a whimper in 1994. In his final televised Raw match, he was tasked with making Lex Luger look good, and his last run of house show circuits saw him on the losing end to a diverse lineup of performers, including Adam Bomb, the iconic Macho Man Randy Savage, and even the bizarre Duke the Dumpster Droese. Following his exit from the WWF in July of 1994, Rick Martel redirected his focus toward what would become a very successful second career in real estate. While countless other wrestlers found themselves lost after leaving the spotlight, Martel demonstrated incredible foresight by already building his life beyond the squared circle. He did, however, make one last electrifying appearance for the company, entering the 1995 Royal Rumble match as a surprise contestant, which gave adoring fans one final nostalgic look at the model. Throughout this transitional phase, Martel never fully abandoned wrestling. He consistently took bookings for independent shows in his native Quebec, ensuring his in-ring prowess remained razor-sharp while he concurrently cultivated his new business empire. While the general consensus among fans was that the model had permanently retired from the sport, the truth was he was biding his time, patiently awaiting the perfect chance to make a spectacular return to a major promotion. That golden opportunity finally materialized in 1998, when Rick Martel sent shockwaves through the industry by debuting in World Championship Wrestling. Yet, what astonished fans even more than his sudden arrival was his absolutely pristine physical condition. At an age where the grueling lifestyle had taken a visible toll on many of his peers, Martel appeared to have defied time itself, looking virtually unchanged from his prime years in the WWF. While a segment of the audience might have groaned at WCW acquiring another ex-WWF talent, those with a deep appreciation for Martel's exceptional technical abilities were thrilled by the prospect of what he could still accomplish inside the ring. The fantastic news for everyone was that Martel could absolutely still perform at an elite level, offering definitive proof that his extended break from the national scene had done nothing to dull his remarkable in-ring talents. The disappointing news, however, was that the iconic model gimmick, the very persona that had made him an unforgettable fixture in the WWF, was completely absent from his new presentation. Although Rick Martel's movements between the ropes were as fluid and polished as ever, spectators couldn't shake the feeling of missing the arrogant, narcissistic character that had made him such a hateable and captivating villain during the early 90s. In a tragically ironic turn of events, Just as it seemed Rick Martel was on the verge of one last magnificent run in professional wrestling, his own body decided to betray him. On the February 16, 1998 edition of Monday Nitro, he achieved a significant milestone by defeating Booker T to capture the WCW Television Championship, silencing any doubters about his ability to compete with the best. While some may have dismissed him as just another wrestler on the WWF Alumni Tour, Martel demonstrated he still possessed the championship pedigree. But the wrestling business can be unforgiving, and a mere week later at the Super Brawl pay-per-view, catastrophe struck. During his championship rematch with Booker T, an awkward landing on the ring ropes caused a severe tear to the inside ligament of Martel's right knee. Compounding this terrible misfortune, he also sustained a fractured leg in the very same bout. In a heartbreaking turn, even though Martel was booked to win the match and keep his championship that evening, the devastating injuries necessitated a last-minute creative change, and the title was handed back to Booker T. Being a competitor who would never surrender easily, Martel bravely attempted a comeback on the July 13, 1998 episode of Nitro, stepping into the ring against Stevie Ray. However, in a twist of fate so cruel it was almost unbelievable, he was injured yet again during that match. Indeed, just as it appeared the model might have enough gas in the tank for one final resurgence, his body was sending him unmistakable messages that perhaps it was truly time to dedicate himself fully to that burgeoning real estate career. The timing of these back-to-back injuries was especially agonizing. Martel had just proven he could still perform at an exceptionally high level, and his television title victory was a clear sign that WCW management had genuine confidence in him. But often, the most challenging aspect of a wrestling career isn't the opponent across the ring. It's recognizing the right moment to hang up the boots. Rick Martel's time in WCW may have been fleeting, but it served as a powerful final testament to his incredible skill and a poignant conclusion to his time in Major League Wrestling. For the final act of his illustrious career, Rick Martel made a conscious decision to have his last match far away from the glaring spotlights and massive arenas of either WCW or the WWF. It's true that most wrestling legends choose to have grand, heavily promoted retirement matches in major companies, but Martel's farewell bout occurred in the intimate setting of an IWF event in Hawaii, where his final opponent was the Metal Maniac. This deliberate choice to say goodbye in Hawaii, completely removed from the mainstream wrestling consciousness, felt entirely consistent with the kind of man Martel had always been. Over the course of his extensive career, he had consistently demonstrated a readiness to compete anywhere on the globe, from the hallowed dojos of Japan to the boisterous arenas of Puerto Rico, and finally, to smaller venues in Hawaii. While many might have assumed a character like the Model would insist upon a more extravagant stage for his swan song, Rick Martel instead chose to conclude his journey entirely on his own terms, with quiet dignity. In a perfectly fitting conclusion, Martel's very last match resulted in a win, as he managed to defeat the Metal Maniac one final time. It was an understated yet honorable end to a legendary career that had spanned several decades and continents. Considering Rick Martel's extensive list of accomplishments and his impact on the business, his continued exclusion from the WWE Hall of Fame stands as one of the industry's most perplexing and debated oversights. The origins of this puzzling situation can likely be found by looking back decades, uncovering a history of disputes that would define his complicated and often strained relationship with the company. The very first point of friction appeared during his contract talks with the WWE back in 1984. Setting himself apart from many peers of that time, Martel flatly refused to sign an exclusive deal that would prevent him from taking bookings in Japan. For an athlete of his international renown, these tours of Japan were exceptionally profitable, often earning him more from a single trip than he would make in months of working for the WWE. More recently surfaced documentation confirms that WWE officials were genuinely taken aback by his steadfast refusal to accept their standard restrictive contract. Although they ultimately reached a compromise, insiders familiar with the negotiations have long claimed that this early display of independence immediately branded Martel as difficult within the corporate hierarchy. His successful run with the model persona created the second major area of contention. Despite the character becoming a huge hit with audiences, it was not the career path that WWE had initially envisioned for him. Veteran WWE writer Bruce Pritchard disclosed on his podcast that the original plan in 1989 was to push Martel into the main event scene as a top-tier babyface. Unfortunately, his unwavering commitment to honoring his lucrative Japanese tour dates caused the company to rethink his position, ultimately recasting him as a permanent fixture in the mid-card instead. While the model gimmick was undeniably memorable and successful, it also effectively placed a ceiling on his career, eliminating any chance of a world championship reign. The third potential source of friction arose from the steroid scandal that rocked the industry in the early 1990s. In stark contrast to many of his colleagues who remained silent, Martel was surprisingly outspoken regarding the intense pressure on wrestlers to achieve and maintain impossibly muscular physiques. While he was careful not to make direct accusations against the WWE, his candid remarks to several French-Canadian newspapers certainly caused a stir, and were not well received by those in the front office. The fourth, and perhaps most revealing issue, surfaced long after his active career had ended. While a great number of stars from his generation became regulars on WWE programming for Legends Nights, historical documentaries, and Hall of Fame induction ceremonies, Martel was conspicuously and consistently absent from nearly all these functions. Over the long period between 2002 and 2023, he was seen on WWE programming for only 2 very brief instances, a starkly lower number than contemporaries like Jake the Snake Roberts or Greg the Hammer Valentine. Knowledgeable industry insiders have pointed out that even when WWE was creating retrospective content centered on his era or the territories where he held championships, Martel was frequently either minimized, ignored, or left out of the narrative entirely. The way Martel has largely stayed out of the public eye since his retirement has sparked considerable speculation about a persistent rift between him and WWE's upper management, a conflict that many believe is the primary reason for his exclusion from the Hall of Fame, despite his extraordinary career. Exacerbating these tensions was Martel's contentious jump to WCW in 1997. Although a great number of wrestlers switched allegiances during that era, Martel's exit happened at an exceptionally fragile time for the WWE. He had reportedly been in the midst of negotiating a major return, not to the ring, but for a vital role as a coach and mentor within the company's developmental system. His decision to sign with WCW instead was interpreted as a significant personal insult by the key figures in power. In recent times, a groundswell of support from both fans and his peers has emerged on social media, advocating for Martel's induction, with esteemed Hall of Famers like Bret Hart and Tito Santana publicly endorsing his case. Furthermore, esteemed historians of the sport consistently point to his revolutionary in-ring technique and his proven global appeal as qualifications that more than justify his place among the legends. Nevertheless, with every passing year, as a new Hall of Fame class is unveiled, Martel's name is conspicuously and consistently overlooked. Whispers from industry insiders, however, suggest that these decades-old grievances might finally be starting to subside. In light of the WWE's recent major changes in leadership and a revitalized emphasis on the sport's deep history, there is a growing belief that Martel might finally be poised to receive his long overdue recognition. Yet, until that day arrives, His glaring absence from the Hall of Fame remains a potent illustration of wrestling's often cutthroat political environment, where sheer talent and a list of accomplishments do not always secure the accolades they so clearly warrant. If you're eager to explore more of wrestling's rich past, consider picking up The Squared Circle, a book overflowing with compelling details about the sport that we all cherish. You can find a link for it in the description below. Also, make sure you don't miss our documentary on Mr. Perfect and the inside story of how he was denied his world title reign. The story of Rick Martel transcends championship victories and his famous narcissistic character. It lives on vibrantly in the classic matches that continue to enthrall fans all these years later. Even though that Hall of Fame induction remains just out of reach, his indelible mark on the landscape of professional wrestling speaks for itself, offering definitive proof that the greatest legacies are often cemented inside the ring, not engraved on a piece of hardware. Please like this video and subscribe for 100 years of good luck. See you next time.